Jake had never imagined that his life would take such a strange turn. One moment he was a pilot, soaring through the endless stars on his routine flight, and the next, his ship was plummeting toward an unknown planet. The crash was violent and sudden, the force of it leaving him unconscious for what seemed like hours. When he finally came to, his head throbbed and his vision blurred. Yet, as he pulled himself from the wreckage, something told him he wasn't on Earth anymore. The sky, above him, was an eerie purple, dotted with swirling clouds that seemed to shift and change like liquid. The ground beneath his boots was soft and spongy, almost alive. Trees with twisting alien branches loomed overhead, casting long shadows across the strange terrain. It was clear that Jake had landed somewhere far from home, a world that was both beautiful and frightening. He staggered to his feet, pushing the pain in his skull aside. The ship was a wreck, its once sturdy frame now a crumpled mass of metal. He wasn't sure what to do next. His communicator was fried, and the rest of his tools were scattered in the wreckage. Jake took a deep breath and decided to search for help. He had survived worse, and this wouldn't be any different. As he walked, the strange sounds of the forest surrounded him, whispers of wind, chirps from unknown creatures, and the occasional rustle of leaves. Yet there was something else, in the air, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. It was as if someone or something was watching him. Jake kept walking, his boots crunching softly on the strange ground, until he saw it. A figure standing in the distance. At first he thought it was a trick of the light, a mirage caused by the heat of the planet's twin suns. But as he drew closer, the figure became clearer. A woman, tall, elegant, with dark, flowing hair that shimmered under the purple sky. Her skin was pale, almost silver, and her eyes glowed with a faint, unnatural light. She stood motionless, as though waiting for him. Her features were sharp, regal, almost otherworldly. Jake had heard of alien species before, but nothing like this. This was no ordinary alien. This was someone who seemed beyond human comprehension. The woman studied him intently as Jake approached. Her gaze was cold, calculating, as if she were trying to read his every thought. She didn't speak, didn't move, just observed him with an air of mystery that sent a chill through Jake's spine. "Are you lost?" Jake asked, his voice steady but laced with curiosity. The woman's lips curved into a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You could say that," she replied in a voice that was both melodic and chilling, as if it held centuries of wisdom and secrets. "But it's you who seems lost, not I." Jake didn't quite know how to respond. He wasn't sure whether he was speaking to a friend or a foe. The way she spoke, the way she held herself, suggested she was no ordinary being. He was about to ask more questions, but before he could, the woman spoke again, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Touch me again," she warned, her gaze sharpening, "and I'll suck your blood." Jake blinked, taken aback by her bluntness. For a moment he wondered if he had heard her correctly. He was used to meeting strange people during his travels, but this was on another level entirely. He chuckled softly, not intimidated by her words. He was no stranger to danger, having faced plenty of it in his life. "Is that a threat or an invitation?" Jake asked, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. The woman's eyes narrowed, but there was something in her expression that betrayed a flicker of surprise. A brief moment where her confident exterior cracked. She had expected fear, maybe even anger, but not amusement. "I warn you," she said, her voice cold as the air around them. "You may not survive my touch." Jake's smirk only grew. "You seem pretty confident for someone who just crashed into my planet." The woman's expression hardened again, but this time, there was something more than just coldness in her eyes. It was curiosity. She was intrigued by him. And that intrigued Jake. "I don't have time for your games," she said, stepping closer to him with an air of authority. "I am Selene, daughter of the Vampirian royal line. You would do well to remember that." Jake looked her up and down. The name Vampirian didn't sound familiar to him, but there was a lot he didn't know about the galaxy. Still, something about the way she spoke with such conviction made it clear she wasn't just another stranded traveler. She was something else. Something powerful. "Jake," he said, offering her a simple nod. "I didn't crash here on purpose, you know." Celine's expression softened for a brief moment, a flicker of something human showing through her icy demeanor. She didn't smile, but her eyes told a different story. "Humans," she muttered softly as though considering the meaning of the word. "You're all the same." Jake raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" Before she could answer, there was a sharp noise in the distance, a sound like the cracking of wood, followed by something large and fast moving through the forest. Celine's body tensed, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the surroundings. Jake's heart raced as he followed Celine deeper into the alien forest. She moved like a shadow, quick and silent, her every step measured and graceful. It was as if she knew the land better than anyone, even though she had only just met him. Jake had always been a quick learner, but Celine seemed to possess knowledge that no human could ever hope to understand. The forest around them was strange, not in a frightening way, but in a way that made Jake feel like he had stepped into another world entirely. The trees were unlike anything he had ever seen, with silver leaves that shimmered in the faint light of the two suns overhead. The air smelled fresh, almost sweet, but there was an underlying tension, an electricity in the atmosphere that Jake couldn't quite explain. As they moved deeper into the woods, the sounds of the forest grew louder, the chirping of strange creatures, the rustle of unseen animals in the underbrush. Yet, Celine walked on, as if she didn't notice the noises at all. She was focused, her eyes scanning the surroundings, her every movement sharp and alert. "Why are you helping me?" Jake asked, his voice breaking the silence between them. Celine didn't stop or turn to look at him. "Helping you?" she repeated, her tone almost amused. "I'm not helping you. I'm ensuring you don't get yourself killed." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Then why bring me along? You don't even know me." "True," she said, her voice flat. "But you're not entirely useless. And you're different from the others." Jake didn't understand what she meant by different, but he wasn't about to ask. They had only just met, and he didn't want to push her too much. She was clearly someone of power, someone who didn't take kindly to questions or interruptions. They reached a clearing in the forest, and Celine stopped suddenly, her body tense. Jake instinctively paused behind her, sensing that something was wrong. He looked around but saw nothing out of the ordinary. The clearing was quiet, almost too quiet. There were no animal sounds, no rustling of leaves. It felt as if the entire world was holding its breath. Celine's eyes darted to the trees surrounding them, her expression hardening. "We're not alone," she said, her voice low. "Stay close." Jake had never been one to follow orders blindly, but something about Celine's command made him pause and reconsider. He didn't know what kind of danger they were facing, but he wasn't about to argue with someone who seemed to know more about survival than he did. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the sound of something crashing through the underbrush. Before Jake could react, Celine sprang into action. She moved with a speed that left him in awe, her body flowing like water as she drew what looked like a long, slender blade from a sheath at her side. Jake instinctively stepped back, his hand reaching for the blaster holstered at his side. He didn't want to use it unless he had to, but he wasn't about to leave himself defenseless. In the blink of an eye, the trees around them seemed to come alive, shadows shifting and moving, until a group of strange creatures stepped into the clearing. The creatures were tall, hunched figures, their skin dark and rough like bark. Their eyes glowed a sickly yellow, and their mouths were filled with rows of sharp teeth. They looked like something out of a nightmare, their growls sending a shiver down Jake's spine. The moment they saw Celine, they stopped, their eyes narrowing, with a mix of hatred and fear. "Shade kind," Celine muttered under her breath. "I should have known." Jake's eyes widened. "What are they, and why are they after you?" Celine didn't answer him right away. Instead, she stepped forward, her stance firm and unwavering. The blade in her hand gleamed in the light, and she raised it slightly, as if daring the creatures to make the first move. "They're the reason I'm here," she said, her voice now laced with anger. "They've been hunting my people for centuries, trying to wipe us out. But they'll find that we're not so easy to kill." Jake's mind raced. These creatures were the ones Celine had been running from, the ones who had followed her here. He could feel the tension in the air, the growing sense of danger as the shade kind advanced toward them. But Celine didn't flinch. She stood tall. "Her blade rays I'll explain later," she said quickly, her tone changing from cold to urgent. "Follow me." Without waiting for a response, Celine turned and disappeared into the trees, moving with an unnatural grace. Jake hesitated for only a moment, then followed her. Whatever this place was, whatever Celine was, Jake sat on a fallen log, still catching his breath after the battle with the shade kind. His heart was racing, the adrenaline still pumping through his veins. Celine, however, seemed completely unshaken. She moved about the clearing, inspecting the defeated creatures with a calm that was both impressive and unsettling. It was clear that fighting wasn't new to her. She moved as if it was second nature. "Are you always this calm?" Jake asked, his voice filled with awe and exhaustion. "Or is it just when you're about to fight for your life?" Celine glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "I don't have the luxury of panic," she replied, her tone cool and detached. "Not when my people's lives are at stake." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Your people?" He had assumed that Celine was just another traveler, lost in the vastness of the galaxy. But it seemed there was more to her than he had first realized. Celine didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped over one of the fallen shade-kind bodies, her boots making soft crunching sounds as they pressed into the forest floor. She didn't seem to be looking at the creatures, but rather lost in thought, her gaze distant. "The Vampirians are an ancient race," she said finally, her voice quieter now, as if sharing something personal. "We have existed for centuries, hidden away from the rest of the galaxy. But we are not what most believe us to be. We are not just powerful beings. We are cursed." Jake listened, trying to piece together the puzzle of this woman standing before him. She was powerful, that much was clear. But cursed? What did she mean by that? "You're telling me that you're cursed?" Jake asked, his curiosity growing. "What kind of curse are we talking about here?" Celine turned her gaze toward him, her eyes dark and unreadable. For a moment she didn't speak, her lips pressed into a thin line. It was clear that this wasn't something she shared easily. "The curse runs in our blood," she said softly. "It has been passed down through generations, shaping the way we live. But it is not something that can be easily explained." She paused, as if considering how much to reveal. "The truth is, I am the last of my kind." Jake's brow furrowed. "The last of your kind?" He wasn't sure what that meant, but the sadness in her voice told him there was more to the story than she was letting on. "Yes," Celine said, her voice almost a whisper. "The Vampirians were once a great people, ruling over entire systems, feared and respected. But over time the shade kind hunted us and we were forced into hiding. And now I am the last living member of the royal line." Jake sat up straighter, a new understanding dawning on him. "The shade kind are after you then? That's why they attacked us back there?" Celine nodded, her expression grim. "Yes. They have been hunting me for years, trying to end the royal bloodline once and for all. But they're not just after me. They want to erase everything that my people were. They want to destroy our legacy." Jake felt a surge of sympathy for her. The idea of an entire race being hunted, wiped out, was unimaginable. And to be the last survivor? The weight of that burden must have been crushing. "But why you?" Jake asked, unable to stop himself. "Why are they so focused on you?" Celine's eyes flickered with something dark. "I don't know for sure," she said. "But I've always suspected that it has to do with the prophecy." Jake leaned forward, his curiosity piqued. "A prophecy?" Celine nodded. "Yes, an ancient prophecy passed down through generations of my people. It foretells that one day, a human would come who would challenge the very foundation of our existence. This human would bring about a new age, one where the Vampirians would either rise again or be destroyed forever. Jake blinked, stunned by what she had just said. "So you think that I am the human in the prophecy?" he asked incredulously. "That I'm somehow supposed to change the fate of your entire race?" Celine's gaze softened for a moment, but her eyes remained filled with caution. "I don't know," she said quietly. "But the way you fought back there, the way you're not afraid, it's unlike anything I've seen in any human before. It's almost as if you've been waiting for something like this your entire life." Jake was silent for a long moment, processing her words. He had never been part of any prophecy, let alone one that could change the fate of an entire species. He had always considered himself just a simple pilot, flying through the stars, doing his job. But now everything was different. The crash, the battle with the Shade Kind and meeting Celine, it all felt like a sign, like his entire life had been leading him to this moment. "And you believe in this prophecy?" Jake asked, his voice quiet. Celine's lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. "I didn't at first. I thought it was just a myth, something to give us hope when we had none left. But after everything that's happened, I'm starting to wonder if it's true." Jake stood up, dusting off his pants. His mind was racing, filled with 1,000 thoughts. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. He couldn't walk away now. Celine had trusted him with her secret, and he wasn't about to let her down. "If I'm part of this prophecy," Jake said, his voice firm, "then I guess we'd better figure out what happens next." Celine's eyes searched his face as if weighing his words. Finally, she nodded, her expression softening just slightly. "Yes," she said, "we will." The days after their battle with the Shade Kind passed quickly, each one marked by a sense of growing urgency. The once peaceful alien world that Jake had crashed onto now felt like a battleground, with every shadow lurking with potential danger. Celine had explained that the Shade Kind weren't the only threat. Her people, the Vampirians, had enemies on all sides, and if they didn't act soon, the curse on her people might be too strong to break. Jake tried to process it all. A prophecy, a cursed race, and now he was somehow involved in saving an entire species. His life, once simple, now felt as though it was twisted into something he didn't fully understand. But Celine was right. He couldn't turn his back on her now. He had already seen what she was capable of, and he had to admit, part of him was drawn to her strength. It had been a few days since the attack. The air had changed, the tension between them growing thick as they prepared for what came next. Jake had been helping Celine gather what supplies they could find. She had made it clear that there was little time to waste, and every moment was precious. "Where are we going?" Jake asked, adjusting the strap on his backpack as he caught up with Celine. The path ahead was rugged, marked by overgrown vegetation and sharp rocks. The land around them was alive in a strange, otherworldly way. The forest was dense, but Celine seemed to know where she was going. It was as if she had been walking this path for years. Celine glanced over her shoulder at him. "To the nearest Vampirian stronghold," she said. "It's not much, but it will do for now." Jake's curiosity piqued. "What's at the stronghold? Why are we heading there?" "It's where my people once gathered before the Shade Kind forced us into hiding. There we'll find what we need to prepare for the war that's coming." Jake frowned. "A war? You said the Vampirians are nearly extinct. What can we do against an enemy like the Shade Kind?" Celine's eyes narrowed. "You still don't understand, do you? The Vampirians may be few in number now, but we are not without power. We have knowledge, ancient weapons, and a deep connection to the land. The prophecy isn't about simply surviving, it's about rising." Jake was quiet for a moment, absorbing her words. He had always believed that strength came from numbers. The more soldiers, the better the chances. But what Celine said made sense. Power didn't always come from size or strength alone. Sometimes it was about strategy, knowledge, and the will to fight. As they walked, Celine began to explain more about the Vampirian legacy. She spoke of her ancestors, how they had once ruled a vast empire using their powers to control not just the land, but the very fabric of the universe itself. The Vampirians were more than just a species. They were a force of nature. But over time, greed and betrayal had weakened them, and the Shadekind had taken advantage of their divided people. Jake listened intently, realizing how little he knew about the galaxy. He had flown through it, seen the stars, but he had never truly understood the conflicts that shaped it. He was learning quickly now, but there was still so much more to uncover. They reached the stronghold, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land. The stronghold wasn't a building in the traditional sense, it was a massive, ancient tree, its roots spread deep into the earth. The tree's bark shimmered with a soft, iridescent glow, and the branches stretched high into the sky, reaching for the stars. It was both beautiful and haunting, a testament to the ancient vampirian connection to the land. Celine led Jake into the hollow of the tree, where she began to work on a series of complex symbols carved into the ground. As she worked, Jake couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This place, this ancient tree, was more than just a hiding spot. It was a symbol of everything the Vampirians had once been, a living, breathing piece of their history. "What are you doing?" Jake asked, watching as Selene traced her fingers over the symbols. "I'm unlocking the archives," she replied. "The records of my people, the weapons we've hidden away, and the knowledge we've kept safe. It's the only way we can prepare for what's coming." Jake stepped forward. "And you think this will help us stop the Shadekind?" Selene met his gaze, her eyes steady. "Eyes, it has to." The air was thick with tension as Jake and Selene made their way through the dense forest, heading toward the heart of the Shadekind's territory. Every step seemed to echo louder than the last, a constant reminder of the danger that awaited them. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into the lion's den, but Selene was unshaken, her eyes focused ahead, her grip on the sword she had claimed steady. The past few days had been a whirlwind of strategy and preparation. Jake had learned more about the Shadekind and the conflict that had raged for centuries between them and the Vampirians. The Shadekind were ruthless, and their leader, a monstrous being named Vorkor, was known for his brutality. He had been the one to destroy Celine's people, and now it seemed he was determined to finish the job. "We're close," Selene said, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it that made Jake stop and listen. "Vorkor is somewhere ahead. We'll need to move quickly." Jake nodded, his hand tightening on the blaster at his side. He didn't know what was going to happen next, but he could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about something much bigger. The fate of an entire species, and perhaps the galaxy itself. As they approached a clearing, Selene stopped, her eyes scanning the area. "This is it," she whispered. "Stay close." The clearing before them was wide, the ground covered in thick grass and wildflowers that swayed gently in the breeze. But something about the place felt off. The air was heavy, almost suffocating, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Jake's instincts screamed at him to be ready, and he drew his blaster, his eyes scanning the shadows that lined the edges of the clearing. He wasn't sure what they were walking into, but he knew that the Shadekind wouldn't be far behind. Then, out of nowhere, the ground trembled beneath their feet. Jake stumbled slightly, steadying himself as Selene's eyes widened. "They're here," she muttered under her breath, already moving toward the center of the clearing. "We have to stand our ground." Jake didn't need any more encouragement. He followed her, his blaster raised, his mind racing as he tried to prepare for what was about to happen. The earth shook again, this time harder, and then from the shadows, the Shadekind emerged. They were massive, hulking creatures, their yellow eyes glowing with malice. Their teeth bared in cruel grins, and their bodies were covered in rough, dark armor. They moved with unnatural speed, circling around Jake and Selene, cutting off any chance of escape. Vorkor, the leader of the Shadekind, stepped forward from the group, his towering figure casting a shadow over them. His eyes locked onto Selene, filled with an ancient, burning hatred. "So the last of the Vampirians has come to die," Vorkor sneered, his voice deep and guttural. "How pathetic." Selene's gaze was unwavering as she faced him. "You'll never win, Vorkor," she said, her voice calm but filled with conviction. This is where it ends. Vorkor laughed, a dark, menacing sound that echoed through the clearing. You think you can stop me? He asked, his tone mocking. You and this human? He is nothing more than a pawn in your game. Jake could feel the weight of Vorkor's words, but he refused to back down. He wasn't just a pawn. He had learned too much about this war, about the power of the Vampirians, and about his own strength. He wasn't about to let Selene fight. This battle alone. I'm not just a pawn, Jake said, stepping forward. His voice was steady, unshaken by the towering threat before them. I'm the one who's going to end this. Vorkor's eyes flickered with surprise, but the moment passed quickly. He smirked, revealing rows of sharp teeth. We shall see, human, he said. Let's see if you have the courage to face true power. The Shadekind began to advance, their steps heavy and thunderous. Jake raised his blaster, firing a quick shot at the nearest creature. The blast hit its mark, but the Shadekind barely flinched, their thick armor absorbing the impact. Selene, however, was already in motion. She moved with speed and grace, her blade cutting through the air with deadly precision. Each strike took down a Shadekind with ease, her focus unwavering as she fought with everything she had. Jake watched in awe as she moved, each motion fluid and powerful, as though she had been fighting for centuries. But even Selene's strength wasn't enough to hold off the entire group of Shadekind. Vorkor's laughter echoed in the air as he stepped closer, his eyes fixed on Selene. You cannot win, Vorkor growled, his voice filled with venom. The Vampirians are weak, and so are you. Jake knew they needed a plan. He couldn't just keep shooting and hoping for the best. He looked at Selene, whose movements were starting to slow, the weight of the battle taking its toll on her. She was good, but even she couldn't fight forever. Then, an idea sparked in his mind. He glanced at the ancient sword she had wielded, earlier the one she had unlocked from the Vampirian stronghold. It was glowing faintly, its blade radiating with energy. If there was ever a weapon capable of taking down Vorkor, it was that. Selene, Jake shouted, hoping to get her attention. She glanced over, her eyes meeting his with a brief flash of recognition. What? Give me the sword, Jake said, his voice urgent. I'll use it. Selene hesitated, but only for a moment. She threw the sword to him, and Jake caught it easily, the weapon's energy pulsing in his hands. It felt alive, almost as though it were an extension of himself. He could feel the power surging through him, and for the first time he believed what Selene had said about the prophecy. He was meant to do this. With the sword in hand, Jake charged toward Vorkor, his movements fueled by a sense of purpose he had never known before. Vorkor turned, his eyes narrowing with fury as Jake approached. You're too late, human, Vorkor snarled. But Jake wasn't listening. With a roar, he swung the sword, the blade cutting through the air with a force he hadn't expected. The sword collided with Vorkor's armor, and for a moment nothing happened. But then, with a loud crack, the armor split, and Jake pressed forward, his strike landing true. Vorkor staggered back, his eyes wide with shock. No! He roared, raising his hands to strike. But it was too late. The sword, with its ancient power, had done its work. Vorkor's strength faltered, and the Shadekind leader fell to his knees, defeated. Jake stood over him, the sword still glowing in his hands, his breath coming in short gasps. It's over, Jake said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of what had just happened. Selene stepped forward, her eyes locked on Vorkor's fallen form. It's over, she repeated, her voice filled with both relief and sorrow. The prophecy is fulfilled. The dust of battle settled around. Jake and Selene, the echoes of the conflict fading into the quiet of the clearing. The Shadekind, once a looming threat, were now nothing more than defeated bodies scattered across the ground. The towering figure of Vorkor lay motionless, his once menacing presence extinguished by the blade Jake had wielded. The air, which had been thick with tension just moments ago, was now strangely calm. Selene stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the fallen leader of the Shadekind. There was no joy in her eyes, only a quiet understanding that the war, while won, had come at a great cost. For centuries her people had been hunted, their legacy nearly erased. And yet now, in this moment, The cycle was finally broken. Jake, still holding the glowing sword, felt a deep sense of relief wash over him. The weight of the prophecy, the fear of failure, had all been replaced with a sense of accomplishment. But there was something more, something deeper. The battle had not just been a fight for survival. It had been a fight for something much greater, the future. Selene turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something he couldn't quite place. "You did it," she said softly, her voice laced with emotion. "You actually did it." Jake lowered the sword, the weight of it still heavy in his hands. He felt a strange connection to it, as though it had become a part of him, a symbol of everything he had learned and fought for. "We did it," he corrected her, his voice steady. "I couldn't have done it without you." Celine's lips curved into a faint smile. "You underestimate yourself," she said, stepping closer to him. "You've proven that you're more than just a human. You're a warrior, a leader. You're the one who changed everything." Jake looked at her, unsure of what to say. The world around them had changed in a single brutal moment. They had gone from enemies to allies, from strangers to something more. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't walk away from it now. "What happens now?" he asked, looking around at the bodies of the shade kind, still lying in the clearing. The battle was over, but the war wasn't. There was still so much left to rebuild. Selene's eyes softened as she looked out over the landscape. "Now, we begin again. The Vampirians have a chance to rise once more. We've been in hiding for too long, but that ends today. It's time for us to reclaim our place in the galaxy." Jake nodded slowly, absorbing her words. There was a long road ahead, filled with challenges and obstacles, but for the first time since he had crashed on this alien planet, he felt hopeful. The victory was just the beginning. "I'm with you," he said, his voice filled with determination. "Whatever comes next, I'm not leaving." Celine's gaze met his, her eyes searching his face as though looking for something. She seemed to find it, for her smile deepened, and she nodded.